Welcome to City Inside Out. In depth today, the monorail. Should there be a neighborhood representative on the board of directors? And is this project moving too fast to accommodate major concerns? We talk with Nick Licata, the chair of the council committee overseeing the monorail, and later a business owner from West Seattle who has so far failed to get nominated to the organization's board. A couple proposed routes would go right through his establishment. The monorail is much in the headlines these days. It's thus time to take a look at the project. We'll do so right after our news. 2 down and 2 to go. That's where things stand in terms of the public hearings into the future of City Light Chief Gary Zarker. More supporters than opponents have shown up to testify. However, one reputable good government group weighed in on the anti-side this week, the Municipal League of King County. They have followed the issue for several months and now say that Zarker should go. The mayor's office is fighting hard for its city light director, including heavy lobbying of council members. Though the amount of public testimony is going in Zarker's favor, no one quite knows what's being said in private. Councilmember Heidi Wills, who oversees City Light, has agreed to meet off the record with anyone who wants to comment on Zarker's performance. 2 more public hearings, and then the council votes. Well, it's the end of an era for the monorail, and they haven't even designed the thing yet. Cab driver Dick Falkenberry has called it quits. He's the man who started the whole monorail movement several years back. Falkenberry stepped down from the organization's board this week, saying it was time for him to get a job. Falkenberry has put countless volunteer hours into the project. Besides, he says he's probably a better watchdog from the outside. 4 others who were confirmed to the new monorail board this week by the city council. At their swearing in, Peter Steinbrück warned the newly minted members not to be too starry-eyed about the big project.
I'm going to ask each of you to take your responsibilities with all appropriate sobriety as you go into the process of developing this great project, and not allow your enthusiasm to perhaps cloud the issues and your decision making. We're all human, and that happens. And I just want you to remember that your greatest responsibility, I think, is really to the citizens of Seattle.
There are 2 monorail board seats left to fill, including Falkenberry's, and those openings have raised a bit of a fuss. Some, like Steinbrück, say there should be at least one skeptical voice. Some say there should be at least one grassroots monorail activist, and some say there should be at least one neighborhood representative from along the route, and no doubt others say something else altogether. We will take up these and similar monorail issues later in our program with Councilmember Nick Licata and a West Seattle man whose business will likely be displaced under the transit plan. On now to the arts. ACT Theater is fighting hard to see that the curtain doesn't come down on its nearly 40-year run here in Seattle. A few weeks back, the downtown venue announced that it owed over $1.7 million to the bank and had only $3,000 in its checking account. Talk about a budget deficit. Theater officials are working feverishly to find a white knight to keep them from going under. And back now to City Hall, where council members this week rejected a citizen initiative to restore and daylight creeks throughout Seattle. Margaret Pagler led the council opposition to the measure. Too complicated and too expensive, she said.
We've received this initiative, had several public hearings, had an analysis by the Municipal League and by a number of city staff that identified some significant legal flaws and fiscal concerns with the initiative, and so this resolution proposes that we reject it.
The council's rejection of the creek restoration initiative means that it will automatically be placed on the fall ballot for Seattleites to make the final decision. Between now and then, the council may draft an alternative of its own for voters to consider. And speaking of citizen initiatives, a plan to change the way city council members are elected to office is gaining signatures. The so-called district elections proposal would carve up the city and elect council members by neighborhood instead of the at-large system used now. Meantime, the City Council this week named a blue ribbon panel to study various alternatives to Seattle's current election system and report back on the pros and cons later this spring. Well, you would have thought donating food to a local food program would be pretty straightforward. Either give food or money, right? That was the assumption the City Council made last fall as they pledged $500,000 to local food programs. However, as Councilmember Jan Trago told her colleagues this week, it's not quite that easy.
Many food programs are limited in the amount or the number of clients that they can serve and the types of food that they can provide by their lack of refrigerated storage space, shelves, cooking utensils, and other operational equipment. So what that really translates to is there's times when there is more food available, but the food banks or the programs aren't able to accept that food because they don't have the infrastructure to store it.
And now for our weekly neighborhood roundup. Here's some of the news being generated across the city. First stop, Discovery Park, where the historic West Point Lighthouse is up for grabs. The federal government is looking for anyone who might want this facility. The landmark is being surplused along with other historic lighthouses around the country. It's yours for free if you can show that you will use it for educational and cultural purposes. The city's Parks Department is among the applicants. And now to Fremont, where the folks who run the Outdoor Sunday Market are celebrating. This week they won a big court victory. A local fitness gym argued that the market was blocking access to their facility and taking up street parking. A judge said not so and will let the Fremont tradition continue. And there's this from the south end. The old Coleman School should finally get a new look. The Seattle School Board is poised to vote next week to sell the dilapidated building to the Urban League for about $800,000. The plan is to transform it into apartments, offices, and an African American heritage museum. And finally, good old Pioneer Square. Efforts there continue at cleaning up and shoring up in the aftermath of the Nisqually earthquake exactly 2 years ago today. And now for our City Inside Out calendar. Here are some of the events of possible interest that we'd like to pass along. Lots of district council meetings coming up. These are your chances to be part of shaping your neighborhood. In Magnolia, Queen Anne, they are meeting on Monday, March 10th. The Ballard meeting is on Wednesday, March 12th. The North District Council meets on the 12th as well. And the Central District Council meets on the 13th. Finally, the Downtown District Council gathers on the 13th as well. And the deadline to announce the technology matching fund applications are due March 10th. Money goes for citizen-driven projects that increase technology, literacy, and access. For more information about any of these events, we direct you to our website at www.seattlechannel.org. And finally today, Mardi Gras. City police are working hard to ensure that Fat Tuesday celebrations this year remain under control. Events occur this coming weekend and next week, but City Hall got into the spirit a little early this year. Indeed, here's some footage from last week's City Council meeting. The revelers were a local Rotary Club with one exception. The person in the middle wearing black is Councilmember Jan Drago. Nothing quite like a masquerade party at City Hall. And that's where we close our news portion of the show today. Just ahead, the monorail. Who should be on the board, especially now that legend Dick Falkenberry has stepped down? And are things going too quickly to make sure that the major questions are being answered adequately? Councilmember Nick Licata joins us when City Inside Out continues right after this. We now welcome Nick Licata. He is a city council member and chair of the committee that is overseeing the monorail work for his colleagues. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What did you think when Dick Falkenberry retired, resigned, got out of the monorail game?
I had a sharp pain. I really will miss Dick from being on the board. I wish that he had stayed on. I think that he brings more than just history. I mean, he really brings a grassroots flavor to the board that you need to have.
You on the council have an opportunity to fill one more slot on this board. You had 2 slots to fill, you fill one.
That's right.
Will you try and get a grassroots replacement, a Dick Falkenberry type person to keep this thing grounded in its past?
If If it was just my decision, I would be strongly oriented that way, but it's not my decision. And there's also a very strong push, and a legitimate push, to have someone who's very concerned about urban design. And so that is probably the direction we'll go. When I say urban design, I'm referring to probably an architect.
Because that's not represented yet in the 9-person board.
Pardon?
That's not represented yet on the 9-person board.
Not
an
really,
architect.
no.
The person that's being talked about, championed by Peter Steinberg, is a guy named Rick Sundborg, big architect
Right.
in town.
Right.
He is, depends on what day you're talking, but sort of a critic, an opponent, certainly not kind of on board, drinking the Kool-Aid sort of guy. Peter Steinberg says that's important. We need someone there who's got some kind of distance from this, some kind of objectivity, if not a skeptical eye, to keep, to keep a watchdog component. Is that an important thing for you?
Well, what's important for me is that we have 9 people, first of all, who can work well together and who recognize that the Monorail Authority is a public body, it has to be responsible to the larger public. And it's important that we have a mixture on that board that includes people who are skeptical, who are going to ask hard questions, going to be watchdogs. What's not critical is that we have people on the board of either just a rubber stamp mentality, whatever the management decides they're in favor of, or no matter what they decide, it's the wrong decision.
But the claim now is that it's too many rubber stampers. That the board
I don't think that's true.
You think there are enough watchdogs on that, or enough people are going to say, hey, it's a big project, got to look under every rock, so to speak?
The people, well, the one person we appointed, Paul Tolliver, was the ex-head of the metro system in King County, did not take a position on the monorail. As far as I know, the 2 people that were appointed by the mayor did not take a position on the monorail. So there's 3 people who are no reason to believe that they'd be rubber stamps. The 4th person or the 2nd person we'll be appointing from the city council is probably going to be someone who's, I guess Rick Sundberg, I just found out today, actually was opposed to the monorail. I didn't realize that. So there's 4 right there. The 5 coming from the current monorail. Tom Weeks is the ex-chair, but I don't think he necessarily rubber stamps everything that the management
Hardly
says.
an outsider, though.
He's not an outsider, but you can't. When you build a 1.2 billion project, you can't build it with just all outsiders. You have to have people who represent what's going on in the city as well.
Let me ask you one more thing about that and the idea of representation of people throughout the city. We are going to, after your segment, have a guest from West Seattle, a businessman over there.
Yeah.
He's been real involved in the monorail. He liked it. He wants to be on this board. He's a West Seattle business guy, can represent a neighborhood interest right now. Even you, I think, would admit this is pretty heavy downtown, the folks who are already on it.
I agree.
Why not this guy or someone that represents Ballard, Soto, West Seattle, etc. on this board?
I think it'd be a good idea. I don't think it's a bad idea at all.
Why aren't you championing him then?
Well, I'd have to fight a battle on the council, like I said, and there's already a predominant orientation to get an urban design person. Now, as far as getting Clay to be the nominee from the monorail board, I think it's a good idea.
He's had no luck so far getting that, of course.
Well, I don't know. I'm not in touch with the monorail board, so I don't know how it.
Does it? Here's the irony. You're the guy that's leading the monorail. Do you ever get scared? Do you ever get up at night and go, "Whoa, I'm the guy"? I mean, we're coming on the heels of a city light.
Right.
Hearings into whether Gary Zarker was or wasn't doing his job adequately, whether the council was or wasn't doing oversight of City Light adequately. You got a budget in this monorail that's close to $2 billion. You're the guy that's leading the colleagues on your council. Do you ever worry that there's a lot to keep track of?
I take my role responsibly, but on the other hand, I have to keep in mind that the Monorail Authority is not a city department like City Light. We do not have final authority over the monorail. They have to contract with the city for permits. We did loan them money. They have to pay us back, so we have to make sure that they're financially solvent to the extent that they can pay back our loans. We're certainly, the city government's concerned about transportation in a broader sense. We're concerned that we would like to have an integrated transportation system that integrates monorail, and should the light rail be built, the light rail, and certainly the bus systems and trolleys, whatever. But The actual legal responsibility for the monorail resides in the monorail board, and that's by design, by state law.
So if they screw up and go over budget and all that kind of stuff, the city is not liable.
We're not legally liable for the bonds, for instance. I'll give you an example. We have a number of public development authorities throughout Seattle. In many of those instances, we appoint the majority of them. We don't even appoint the majority of this board. And we do not have authority over those PDAs, that's referred to public development authorities. But if there's a situation where we believe that there is gross misdemeanor, then we will make our views known, and we will obviously say that we cannot move forward in cooperation with them.
You can obstruct things, or
right.
Speaking of moving forward, a lot of people say this thing's moving really fast. I mean, in a month from now, they will develop a preferred alternative, do an EIS, and then this thing they want to start building very quickly. Is that too fast? You have some people in various parts of town who still have concerns about which side of the street it should go on and how many businesses it should displace for these different stations. We have 1 month to make that decision.
Right. Well, it's not that decision. Come April 1st or April 2nd is not a final decision. That is a preferred alternative that goes out to study. What's most important in the EIS that's going out, that environmental impact statement, is that the alternatives be listed. And you have to make sure that there's enough alternatives that allows for a good comparison and good discussion. That's what's most critical. So the door is not at all closed on
it's kind of like Fox News announcing George Bush is the winner, the night of the election. The claim was, and obviously they did that wrong at the time, but the claim was that sort of set the stage for a bias and a built-in kind of favoritism to Bush. When you get a preferred alternative, and here's my analogy, announced on April 2nd, pretty hard to change that, isn't that? Even though you're going to study some alternatives, aren't they necessarily going to be of lower priority? Don't the big decisions get made April 2nd?
I really don't see it that way. I mean, I see that the preferred alternative, it gives people an opportunity, quite honestly, to take shots at. I mean, what would happen if they went out and said there's 4 different alternatives and we're looking at all 4 of them? Then it would actually, in some ways, put more power in the hands of the board because they can go back and pick and choose. They're basically putting out one and saying, okay, this is the one that we prefer. Take a shot at it. And here's the other alternatives we're looking at.
Is it, what's the balance between moving the project too fast and potentially screwing up, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that is the biggest, I think, tension we're going to see as we go forward with the monorail. I mean, it was a split vote, essentially. Half the city basically was not inclined to go forward with it, and half want it. So there's not like an overwhelming desire to get this thing built no matter what. On the other hand, it did win the vote. We do have the money, and I think we need to move forward with it, but we need to do so in a responsible manner. And I think the tension is going to be between cost and design. And when I say that, is the more time you take, that means the more time you can devote to good design. On the other hand, that drives up the costs. And with every major public project, there's always a concern about, are you going to keep on budget? Are you going to keep on the schedule that you gave out? So I see the city council's role as trying to assure as best urban design as possible, at the same time trying to assure that they're making decisions in a fiscally responsible manner as well.
30 seconds. You got a review committee that you're empaneling to help you with this oversight role.
I will be introducing a resolution next month to establish a technical advisory panel. It will consist of lawyers, it will consist of bankers, it will consist of financial consultants and perhaps an engineer or two to provide technical advice to the council on the nature of the documents that the monorail provides to us.
No doubt there'll be a fight over who's going to be on that board.
I actually don't think so. I've been working with the council members pretty closely. We're trying to strip all the politics out of that advisory panel and get it just to be experts.
Fair enough. Thanks for being here, Nick Licata.
Thank you for the invitation.
Stay with us. Up next, a West Seattle businessman who would like to be on the monorail board, and why not? The current plan would have a stop right in his establishment. Stay with us. City Inside Out continues in a moment. We now welcome Clay Sales to the program. He is the owner of Guppy's, a bar and grill in West Seattle, where one of the monorail stops is planned.
Yep.
You wanted to be on the board, and you haven't so far succeeded in convincing anyone you should. Why not?
I don't really know. We've tried to make our concerns about having a neighborhood representative on the board very clear, and we haven't been able to get, I don't think, enough attention to get some energy behind it other than the press that we've gotten.
I mean, what's your view about the current board and the current people that have been nominated and confirmed?
The concerns that we have about the current board mostly center around the fact that it's primarily loaded with folks with major downtown interests. We don't see somebody that we can look to as a champion for the issues that the businesses and communities on the other 12 miles of the monorail, that's the 12 miles that aren't in downtown, that we can look to as a champion for our issues. And we have very different issues from what downtown has.
I mean, how do you figure that out, though? I mean, how do you get? Is it a West Seattle person you should have? Is it a Soto person? Is it a Ballard person? An Interbay person? I mean, you certainly can't have someone from every neighborhood.
No, and it's not really appropriate even to have somebody from every neighborhood because there's too many different skills that are necessary to have on a board like this. What we do think is it's appropriate to have one. Mm-hmm. And one person can fairly effectively represent all of those neighborhoods because we have most of the same issues.
You looks like you probably won't be nominated for the last two open positions, but you're planning on running?
Yeah, it's a commitment I made to the business community early on. I said that when I said I'd step up and submit my name for consideration for an appointment, that if it didn't come through, that I was willing to stand for the election this fall. We believe strongly enough that there needs to be a neighborhood representative, somebody from one of the communities directly affected, that I said I'd step up and run. And
for viewers that don't know, two of the 9 board positions initially get appointed and then they rotate into elected positions.
Right, they come up for election in the fall and then they take office in January.
Is that going to be too late? Your concern is what about the timing?
The timing is a little problematic because as you know, the monorail is on an accelerated time schedule, which is one of the good things about it. They got their funding and they're going to get it built. What happens with the elected positions, though, is the current time schedule, they're going to publish their preferred alternative April 2nd, go immediately into an EIS process, and their plan is to have the whole thing done in the can and ready to contract by the end of the year. With the 2 elected positions not actually taking office until January, there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of being able to be involved in those early planning processes.
I mean, do you worry that you're not going to, that your neighborhood representation is in fact going to be too late?
In effect, yes. At that point, the routing decisions and some of the major alignment decisions we made at that point, and that's where a lot of our concerns are right now.
Here's the deal. You own a bar and grill, successful bar and grill in the Alaskan Junction in West Seattle. It's going to go right through your building, the current kind of preferred alternative, it seems, what will be the preferred alternative. I mean, no wonder you don't like it.
You know, it's not so much about losing my building. I've told the monorail before, I don't mind losing my building. I can move. My business is one that can very successfully be relocated to any place in that area of West Seattle. My clientele will follow me. I'm probably, of the businesses in the Junction, the one who is the easiest to move. Where I started getting concerned was when I discovered that they were planning on taking out most of my block. And that includes several businesses that it would be much more problematic for them to move, and businesses, quite frankly, that act as a major anchor for the business district. They're one of our major draws.
And so, you were a supporter. I mean, even though knowing you weren't going to probably survive in your current location,
right?
You're willing to say, hey, it's the good of the community, and I'll move across the block or down the street if that's what it takes.
Yeah, I don't believe in the whole NIMBY argument, not in my backyard. If you're for the monorail and what they need is reasonable, then you make sure they get it. And taking my building is reasonable.
So how many alternatives will be, and this is a big deal, how many alternatives will be studied, do you think, for the Alaskan Junction? In other words, they will consider the one that takes out all the businesses along there? Will they consider ones that take out none of the businesses, just your business? What do you know about the alternatives being studied?
What they're telling, well, all I know is what they're telling us. And what they're telling us is that they're going to publish a preferred alternative, which is their vision of the route. And that is what the EIS will be based on. So my understanding is that there won't be the preferred alternative and several options. they're going to publish the one they want to do and then do the EIS based on that.
And you have drawn up a picture about a possible alternative up there that would take out not 6 businesses or so, but just one, namely really yours.
Right.
And are you getting anywhere in that?
We didn't for the longest time. I had a meeting yesterday with our community outreach representative, and it sounds like they're starting to listen to us a little bit. I've started seeing some of our options showing up in preliminary sketches. Whether those end up in the preferred alternative is another matter and yet to be seen.
How does this organization feel to you? Too fast?
It doesn't feel too fast. Seattle has a history of processing itself to death. I think it's probably good that the monorail's on a fast track. It feels a little bit like a downtown ramrod job right now. There are a lot of people on the board who have major downtown interests. Downtown had some major issues with the initial alignments, and most of them have gotten resolved to downtown's benefit. What we're not seeing is somebody who has that kind of passion about our issues.
Even though they're representatives in the monorail organization for each of the neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's a difference. The way I've explained it before, it's a difference between speaking and wondering if you're being heard and speaking and knowing that you're being heard. And that knowing comes with knowing that there's somebody who's on the hook.
Is there any opportunity between now and April 2nd to get your route studied as a preferred alternative?
We've been working as closely as we can with the people that have been presented to us as our contacts to get our options on the table. Quite frankly, we haven't had a lot of success here until just recently. I actually had a meeting yesterday where I started seeing some sketches that were closer to things we might be willing to accommodate. But again, it's kind of late in the process. It's hard to tell if it's really going to show up in the documents on April 2nd or not. And that's really where the rubber hits the road, is April 2nd.
What about parking?
Parking is the one issue that unites all of the communities all up and down the line. On the other 12 miles, the 12 miles that aren't in downtown Seattle. The initial design documentation doesn't include a lot of parking, and the city has already said that they're not interested in building parking. So we're kind of left wondering what they're planning on doing with all these commuters who will drive into the monorail stops and want to take the monorail downtown. Quite frankly, one of the draws for our communities is the fact that we have parking. You can come to West Seattle and find parking very easily, almost always right on the street, be able to get in, get your errands done, and get home. Without that parking, it takes away one of our major benefits.
Are you worried that you're going to lose that parking?
Yeah, we're concerned that they either won't do anything, which will severely
preserve that parking in perpetuity?
That they won't put in parking at all.
Yeah.
Or that what they put in will not accommodate the volumes that they'll be bringing in.
With that, we got to close. Thanks for being here, though.
Thank you.
Clay Sales is the owner of Guppy's Bar and Grill over in West Seattle. You'll be watching, no doubt, on April 2nd.
Oh, yes.
We thank you all for watching. Join us next time for another edition of City Inside Out. Until then, on behalf of all of our talented studio crew here at the program, I'm C.R. Douglas. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you.